各位觀眾大家好，歡迎收睇26分鐘見證實錄。加拿大郵務公司大約55,000名嘅工人喺去年11月中發起咗為期近1個月嘅全國大罷工。由於罷工期間係適逢黑色星期五同埋聖誕節嘅購物旺季，令到唔少零售商同國民都受到一定程度嘅影響。而有部分十分依賴郵務公司嚟到運送信件同包裹服務嘅小商戶面對服務嚴重滯後，唔單止影響到日常營運，更加造成咗金錢上嘅損失。究竟今次嘅罷工，小商戶面對住啲乜嘢後續挑戰？佢哋喺過程之中又點樣自救呢？
Our clients wanted to have their material ready as soon as the strike lifted, so we would continue to produce mail jobs and stack them in cages like you see behind me here, and those cages would basically just stack up.
Merchants, certain types of small businesses do use it for parcels, and they had to pay a real premium in order to get it delivered during the strike itself.
加拿大郵務工人嘅全國罷工為社會各行業帶嚟不便。對於依賴郵遞服務嘅小商戶喺今次罷工有乜嘢經歷同體會呢？Paul Mackey 喺大溫地區開設印刷公司，主要服務包括為客戶提供宣傳品印刷、文件釘裝同包裝服務等等，並使用加拿大郵務公司嘅服務，將郵寄宣傳品派送俾收件人。佢當時知道郵務工人準備發起罷工嘅時候，感到極度失望，不過都只能夠無奈接受。
Yeah, so when we heard, I think it was a Sunday night when we got word of the strike going into effect, and we knew it was coming. We knew it was a possibility, a very real possibility. So, we basically just started thinking of how we're going to keep work moving and make sure that our team and our clients were informed of what was going on, and make sure that they were well informed with the negotiation process. And we, just rolled with the punches and made sure that the work kept moving to the best of our ability during that stretch.
郵務公司係印刷公司其中一個重要嘅合作伙伴，佢哋每星期有5日都會將裝滿郵寄宣傳品嘅箱運送到郵務公司嘅分站，並派發俾收件人。而郵務公司負責運送嘅訂單佔印刷公司嘅總訂單數量大約50%。Mackey 憶述，有客戶得知罷工消息之後，隨即取消訂單，即時對佢嘅生意造成打擊。
So we were affected even leading up to the strike because there was a lot of talk about this strike coming up, right? Like it was on the radar for a lot of clients. They were already in advance of the strike making alternative plans to get their messages out to their end recipients. So once the strike did hit, though, we had some clients that just canceled their mailings altogether. It's a critical time of the year for a lot of our not-for-profit sector accounts that we deal with. For them, that's their biggest time for donations. So it really impacted them, and as a result impacted us and our ability to deliver that for our clients. It also had a backlog of mailing material in our plant because we were still producing mail as the strike was going on. Our clients wanted to have their material ready as soon as the strike lifted, so we would continue to produce mail jobs and stack them in cages like you see behind me here, and those cages would basically just stack up. We have another facility on 5 Road, and basically we were shipping all the prepped mail over to that facility and staging it in different areas, either in shelf pallet locations, or what we actually had to do was rent a 52-foot trailer, and we had to basically just stage caged mail in that trailer until the strike was lifted.
Mackey 又話，公司除咗印刷郵寄宣傳品之外，亦都負責包裹嘅印刷同包裝服務。由於郵務工人罷工，包裹嘅派送服務同樣停止。為咗維持公司嘅業務，佢哋喺初期曾經嘗試揾其他郵遞服務公司派送包裹，不過由於需求急增，其他郵遞服務公司之後都開始超出負荷。
Yeah, so it was basically a two-pronged issue because we had the mailings that couldn't go. We don't have another alternative method to get mailings out to recipients. Canada Post is the only way to do it. That was one part of the problem, but then the parcels that Canada Post delivers were also stalled during that strike. For the parcels, we were able to partner with other carriers during that stretch to get those parcels out to clients, which was very helpful, but it did result in those other carriers being overloaded with the volume that was coming from Canada Post. So they basically had too many parcels and not enough people to deliver them. So it resulted in a real slowdown in material getting out to end recipients on the parcel side, while mail was basically just stuck in the system altogether.
郵務工人嘅全國罷工由舊年11月中展開，由於時間正值黑色星期五同聖誕購物旺季前夕，令唔少零售商同國民受影響。渥太華大學經濟學系教授 David Gray 話：今次罷工同時影響依賴郵遞服務嘅商戶。
Well, most of the billing and payments can be done virtually now online. So I think it's particularly with the parcels that merchants and businesses which mail out their merchandise, like their gifts during the Christmas season. They use the parcel service. And it is very, very important in rural areas, not so much in urban areas. So small businesses in rural areas probably were negatively impacted.
Gray 又話：今次郵務工人罷工已經對公司嘅聲譽帶嚟影響，並逐漸令市民對佢哋提供嘅服務質素失去信心。
Well, I think that the reputation of Canada Post was diminished. For instance, I receive mail from the banks and from charities and things like that, and they're almost all approaching me saying, "Go online, go online." I was told just a few days ago that I'm not going to get my bank statements anymore through the mail. So yeah, Canada Post is in very, very serious decline. They raised their prices considerably, but recently, but even if consumers don't respond all that much to the price increase, that's just nowhere near enough to close the gap.
郵務工人喺12月中旬陸續復工。Mackie 話暫時仍然未知道罷工對整體營業額造成幾大影響，不過由於有好多客戶取消訂單，預計11月到12月嘅營業額必定會較往年差。不過工人復工仍然係好消息，意味可以清除積壓嘅郵寄宣傳品同包裹。
It obviously was a big help once the strike lifted, for sure, a big relief. We were able to clear all the backlog of mail over to Canada Post. It still delayed a lot of our clients' messaging to their recipients at a very key time of the year, right? So that was lost time that they just couldn't get back. Like we said, that's a very prime time for donations to come in for the not-for-profit sector. And those mailings were just delayed and they missed the Christmas season. So it was an impact, but once it got going again, it was a big relief, and Canada Post was able to get back on track relatively quickly.
Gray 就相信社會喺罷工之後應該好快回復正常，不過今次郵務工人罷工仍然揭露另一個問題，就係郵務公司嘅長遠發展係點樣。
The strike ended about a month ago, and I'm not sure that they are totally back to normal with the flow, but they should be back very, very soon. So the negative economic impact, I think, is pretty much confined to rural areas, non-urban areas, and then certain types of merchants, certain types of small businesses do use it for parcels. And they had to pay a real premium in order to get it delivered during the strike itself. There is UPS and Purolator and the like. So I assume that prices are back down again. But I think that the most interesting questions are going forwards. It's just completely unsustainable.
Gray 又話：郵務公司需要得到聯邦政府嘅補助，先可以維持目前嘅營運模式，否則可能要選擇減少服務嘅質素。
Than would otherwise be the case because of the strike. It's just completely unsustainable. The 1970s are over with. No, the technology of production. So I think that the volume of letter mail is down by about 60% over the past decade, for example. And then as far as parcel delivery is concerned, for a while that was making up for some of the shortfall in delivery of letter mail. And that's why Canada Post wanted to expand service to 7 days a week for parcel delivery only. But they also have stiff competition from any number of parcel delivery services that do not have the mandate to deliver absolutely everywhere. So it's either subsidize the operations of Canada Post, I can't give you a dollar figure, something that they can't do. I don't think that they can outlaw competition for delivery of parcels. So the only way out, as I see, is either a drastic reduction in the not quality, but the quantity of service, the frequency of service, or government subsidies.
Mackie 就希望公司可以喺今次嘅罷工行動中吸取經驗，為未來可能再發生嘅罷工做好充分嘅準備。
Yeah, exactly. We need to be prepared for the worst case. Like we were in November, we're proactive with our messaging to our account managers and to our team, to our clients as well, that the possibility of the strike is there. The only way we can prepare is just be in constant contact with Canada Post and our contacts there, and ask them when the earliest strike could potentially happen again, which they're going to get back to me on. And then all you can do is just kind of cross your fingers and hope that the union and the corporation again can find some common ground and close the gaps that they are seeing in that collective bargaining agreement that they're working under right now.
加拿大郵務公司喺罷工期間一度臨時解僱咗部分嘅工人，引起咗社會各界嘅爭議。咁究竟呢一個做法係咪真係剝削咗工人罷工嘅權利呢？我哋下一節翻嚟繼續睇。歡迎翻嚟節目時間。郵政工人長達近1個月嘅罷工最終喺聯邦政府嘅介入之下結束，並且要求佢哋即時復工，直至到今年嘅5月。不過，加拿大郵務公司喺罷工期間臨時解僱部分嘅工人嘅做法就惹嚟咗爭議。咁究竟本國工人係咪享有充分嘅罷工權益呢？而聯邦政府喺呢一次嘅勞資糾紛之中，又擔當住乜嘢角色呢？
加拿大郵務公司喺郵務工人發起罷工之後大約2個星期，突然話會臨時解僱部分罷工嘅工人。公司發言人解釋呢一個做法係由於公司嘅業務喺罷工過程中受到重大影響，需要採取措施調整營運模式。發言人又話，公司已經通知部分罷工工人，根據加拿大勞工法，集體協議將唔會再有效，佢哋嘅僱用條件亦都會改變。有研究勞工權益嘅學者話，郵務公司難以提供合理嘅理由，證明點解需要臨時解僱工人。
The move to lay off workers who were on strike was a rather strange and questionably illegal maneuver on the company's part. You're not allowed to replace striking workers and retaliating against workers for union activity. And the only reason that they would be able to justify layoffs would be if they had a legitimate economic reason. But they obviously, if anything, had more reason to hire workers than lay them off because they were having a strike.
佢又話公司嘅做法更加似以威嚇嘅手段嚟削弱工人喺談判時候嘅能力同權利。
It's important to recognize here when we're talking about workers going on strike in Canada that the Supreme Court ruled in 2015 that their right to strike is protected activity under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It's not just some nice to have kind of thing that we can violate when it gets too inconvenient, right? These are fundamental charter protected rights that we're talking about. And so when the employer tries to undermine that right by using scare tactics like laying people off in the middle of a strike, it it violates their charter protected rights, but it also undermines the collective bargaining process because it does not demonstrate a good faith effort to reach agreement at the bargaining table.
一直關心勞工權益嘅聯邦新民主黨黨領組面成都認為油務公司做法欠缺誠信。
No, not at all. I think it was undermining the rights of workers. When they're on strike, you're not supposed to be able to lay off workers that are on strike. So initially they did push for the layoffs, and then I think they had to reverse them. That was the work of the union to get those jobs back. But yeah, this is a bad faith move. If workers are on strike, you shouldn't be able to lay them off.
加拿大油務工人工會 CUPW 其後發聲明，話喺經過調解之後，同公司達成和解方案，俾早前被遣散嘅工人繼續工作。不過勞資雙方仍然未能夠達成新嘅協議。不過聯邦勞工部長麥金龍喺罷工開始之後1個月，即係舊年12月中突然宣布，認為雙方未能夠喺年底前達成新協議，下令要求油務工人復工。
Not only have the parties been able to show any progress towards an agreement, the federal mediator has now informed me that the negotiations between both parties are now, in fact, going in the wrong direction. So I'm here today to announce that I am applying a solution to promote conditions favorable to the settlement of this labor dispute and protect the interests of all Canadians. Today I've used my powers under the Canada Labour Code. It is my view and the view of the FMCS that the parties are at an impasse. I have asked the Canada Industrial Relations Board, if they also determine that there is an impasse, to order Canada Post and all employees represented by CUPW to resume and continue their operations and duties, and to extend the terms of the existing collective agreements until May 22nd, 2025.
不過早面成就話，聯邦政府嘅罷工嘅做法係縱容僱主打壓工人權益，亦都未能夠令工人得到公平待遇。
I think that the federal government should force the boss, the employer in this case, to negotiate a fair deal. For too often we see the federal government intervene and tip the scale in favor of the boss, and it hurts the worker and it rewards bad behavior. So we think that is wrong. I want to see fairness for the worker, and I want to see governments force the employer to negotiate in good faith.
卑斯大學政治學系講師 Stewart Press 都同意，政府介入係側重僱主利益，咁樣無可避免會損害工人嘅權益，好難揾到一個平衡點。
Well, I think the government is clearly it's choosing to support a position that I think is more supportive of the business side of the labor dispute here, and I think that is reflective of a sense that this government, while it tries to support worker rights where it can, in the final analysis, it is going to make decisions that it sees as in keeping with supporting the larger performance of the economy rather than the interests of particular groups of workers. And your mileage will inevitably vary on whether you think the health of the economy is more important than the ability of workers to negotiate using labor tactics. I think it's certainly curtailing the workers' rights here, and in this case, to use their leverage as a bargaining union, and to use the tool of a strike to try to bring the employer, Canada Post in this case, to the bargaining table and to grapple with the issues that workers have. For sure, I think it is something of a balance. Inevitably, there is not an unlimited right to strike, but there is also real dangers when employers are given the ability to essentially push aside workers' concerns without really seriously grappling with them. And
過去1年，本國有唔同行業，包括港口、鐵路等工人嘅工會都發起罷工。社會各界對於政府是否以及幾時應該介入罷工有唔同睇法。艾倫認為政府應該採取乜嘢立場同態度，首先會以經濟角度為考慮因素。
I think that a big reason has to do with the level of economic disruption, right? The Canada Post strike was certainly economically disruptive, but when you compare it to the ports or the rails, it's about an order of magnitude less in terms of dollar amounts, right? So it was like, $100 million a day instead of $1 billion a day. Right. And so I think the federal government was a bit more willing to let it try and let it play out. But and importantly, I think in the Canada Post case, what's interesting to note there is that Canada Post itself was not calling for government intervention. It was really employer groups and business representatives that were the ones that were leading the call for government intervention. It was not the employer, which is very different from the rail and port strikes, where the employer associations were leading the charge. So I think that those are the main reasons why it did take longer for the federal government to intervene in the Canada Post strike.
Press 就覺得政府幾時加入罷工，取決於受事態影響嘅人數。不過長遠而言，加拿大郵務公司面對嘅競爭只會越嚟越大，更加重要係思考點樣轉型。
I think it is always going to be a context-dependent decision. The more essential the service we're talking about, I think the greater the pressure on government to do something or to be seen to be doing something to manage that particular challenge. But of course, the more essential the service is, then the more there is pressure on government and the employer to ensure that the grounds on which a strike may happen are fully addressed. And so I think the more willing a government is to intervene in a situation, the more they have to consider that there still needs to be consideration paid to the issues that workers are raising. I think it's particularly challenging in this case because Canada Post is essentially a corporation in decline. It is under sustained pressure that is only going to intensify in future from companies like Amazon that effectively does for many Canadians what Canada Post used to do for all Canadians. And so that suggests Canada Post really needs to rethink its business plan.
對於聯邦政府喺勞資糾紛中嘅角色，兩個學者都認為政府更加應該成為一個協調者，積極不干預兩方嘅談判。
It's a good question. I think there's a couple of different interests that the federal government has to hold on to simultaneously. One, it has to act as a kind of convening power to set the guidelines under which bargaining takes place, and so that means putting in place labor relations procedures that create space for protection of workers' rights to organize and to undertake bargaining, and also to ensure that employers are able to continue to provide the services that they're trying to provide, but not do so while effectively robbing workers of their ability to maintain gainful employment. So it is a kind of third-party responsibility to ensure a predictable labor relations environment above all. There are also other times where the federal government has other interests in safeguarding some larger concern of the country, some kind of national interest, and in the provision of, say, essential services.
The month-long plus strike is a product of a broken collective bargaining system where the employers don't feel compelled to reach agreement at the table because ultimately the government's going to step in and put an end to the strike. And so in order to have an effective collective bargaining system, you need to remove the expectation that the government will come and save the employers in the end. And I think that is the best thing if the government is serious about actually defending workers' charter-protected right to collective bargain and to strike and to be active in their union. If the government is serious about protecting those rights, they need to send the message that employers need to reach agreement at the table, and not just send that word out, but put actions behind it by not intervening the way they have.
身為老闆嘅 Paul Mackey 就希望加拿大郵務公司同工會揾出一個雙贏嘅方案，避免再次罷工。
So obviously, tricky situation. You want, all of our partners that we're working with, you want, the employees to be paid a fair wage and to have good working conditions. And but when it affects, an entire country like the Canada Post strike did, you hope that the union and the corporation can get together and find an agreement before it gets to that point. That's the biggest thing and the biggest frustration for a lot of the companies that rely on mail is that they were not able to find a resolution, even though they had plenty of time to work something out. And it came down to a work stoppage, which affected millions of people across the country, right?
好啦，今集嘅節目時間差唔多啦。咁如果觀眾對我哋嘅節目有啲乜嘢意見嘅話，係好歡迎大家以電郵嘅方式同我哋聯絡㗎。我哋嘅電郵地址係 mag26@fairchildtv.com。如果觀眾想上網重溫今集嘅節目，亦都可以上到去我哋嘅網站3w.fairchildtv.com， 點擊節目重溫一欄就可以睇得返㗎啦。下星期同一時間再同大家見面，晚安。